Hi, this is Jim Janossy, and this is Chapter 14 of The Story of Art. In this chapter, which is rather brief, we're going to be looking northward from Italy, where the Renaissance took place, to Northern Europe, where some of the concepts of the Renaissance were much slower to catch on. Once again, the period we're looking at for the Renaissance spans from Brunelleschi through Raphael, roughly 1350 to 1500. This is an example of Gothic architecture perpetuated in the northern part of Europe even after it had lost favor in Italy. What we see here is really running out of gas. Very garish looking ornate decorations that serve no purpose, just getting ever fancier on buildings. Architects in this area were slower to adopt many of the practices, the resumption of ancient Greek and Roman forms as already practiced by this time, 1480. In Italy, where the Renaissance took hold. This is an example of what's called a perpendicular style cathedral with a fan vault. This is what's referred to as a fan vault, this idea that fans more or less are represented by this, and perpendicular means a lot of straight lines. A Gothic design is simplified. There are no side aisles here. It's a big open space, and it looks very fine. Instead of tracery, we have this sort of design here. But this also was losing favor. The whole Gothic idiom had very little mileage left in it at this point, and people were interested in something new. Here is an example of art where, much like Brother Angelico, the artist Stefan Lochner in this case, did combine some concepts of the Renaissance, this idea of having depth indicated here. Here the Virgin Mary and Jesus is drawn much like Brother Angelico might have, kind of in the style of the Wilton diptych. Although even here light perspective is being used much more with the shading of the cloth to give a 3D effect. And even here, as Gombrich notes, these angels are holding up this background as kind of a curtain rather than it being a solid surface. And even there, although it's gold, it has some decoration, these flowers on it. But the main element here is this idea of depth being shown like a sort of a platform, but great detail. And really a simple pose, a simple dignified pose, much like the artists of the Middle Ages would have done. This is an interesting example of an illuminated manuscript. What's happening here is that the book has been finished and it's going to be presented to the person who ordered it. And very interestingly, the person who's created this illuminated manuscript has put a front page onto it that actually has a little drawing here of him presenting it. Here he is kneeling, presenting it to this standing person who had ordered the book. And you see it's sort of like the building is cut away so you can see into it. But interestingly enough, what he's done is to put now here into this illustration, the main illustration of the illumination, these scenes of ordinary life in the medieval town. This is the kind of thing that was put at the lower part of the page down here underneath the actual illumination and the wording of the page. On that much earlier example, you saw kind of a sketch like this, maybe just for some relief at the bottom. But now, here in this northern European manuscript of the late 15th century, we see that idea of ordinary life creeping in even to the illustrations on the main part of the page. Here we have an artist, Fouquet, working in Northern Europe in the middle of the 1500s. We do see a number of things here that would indicate that he's picked up on Renaissance techniques. First of all, take a look at this. This whole idea of tile floors that are receding and this line here that's receding. There's a vanishing point way off to the right of this painting that the artist chose to put the background. We have here a very dignified appearance of a saint. This is St. Stephen, the first martyr of the Christian Church, and very much in keeping with something that we'll see in much later artworks as well. The saint is identified by the means by which he was martyred. Stephen was stoned, and here's a sharp stone sitting on the Bible, and he's holding it. But it's pretty apparent that this artist also, in working in Northern Europe, had picked up a lot of what Van Eyck had developed in terms of technique of oil painting. And you take a look at the way this cloth is drawn here. Very, very rich, very much attention to detail here in this decoration on the saint's clothing. But here, this is the kind of an effect that you get when you first paint the shades in with black, and then you paint over it with this burgundy color, and the oil pigment being translucent lets the underlying paint show through. And that's the way that an artist would create these very magnificent effects, chiaroscuro effects here, showing cloth in a very realistic way. So you can see the influence here of Van Eyck and oil painting on this Northern European painter. Here you see an even better example of this. In this example, it's a very tastefully done, very artfully done scene for an altarpiece, Christ being taken down from the cross. The fact that it's an altarpiece accounts for this rather unusual shape for it. What you see here is a composition that has the symmetry of Middle Ages concepts, but it also has a grace shape in the way that the body is shaped here. Here's Christ's body shaped like this, and here is his mother, Mary, having fainted exactly the same sort of a curve. And the counterpoint here between the very calm faces of the men and the emotional faces of the women here. And on top of all, the very marvelous type of artistry that's been shown here with these very vivid, high-quality pigments, this ultramarine blue, this very vivid red, this sort of a faded purple here, and the way that the cloth is drawn with all this light perspective, giving a sense of depth and realism. Very much detail here, and in fact, it's all highly detailed without losing any of the essence of it because it's a very shallow scene. There isn't any distance of any consequence here where you would expect the detail not to be present in the background. Very marvelous example of oil painting with a lot of the earlier styles, the Gothic and the Middle Ages concepts being displayed here, along with the grace of placement and the capabilities of oil painting being very masterly demonstrated. Here we have a similar piece in the same era. I don't think quite this has the artistry that we see here. This is another scene that does depart from Middle Ages concepts in the fact that every one of the apostles here, crowded around the dying Virgin, does have a unique face. And there's a lot of different types of expressions shown here. You can see emotion on some faces and kind of a resignation on others, and here kind of a bewildered look, and here almost a staring look. But in some ways, the picturing here is a little bit flat. It's a little bit more, even in spite of the fact that there's this artistry of the chiaroscuro effect for the draping of the cloth, it does tend to look a little bit flatter. The artist here was grappling with that. He was trying to arrange this in such a way that no part of the picture lacked for interest and meaning. But of course it was a very challenging undertaking to crowd this many people around somebody reclined on a bed, and then again Jesus here welcoming his mother with his open arms. Apparently she's the only one who can see that vision.